Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. We are going to get started on talking about some strategies for giving exams online. So I'm Wendy Tietz. I teach at Kent State University, and I'm joined by Jennifer Canis from University of South Florida.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
We will ask that you use the Q&A box, the question ask and answers box for questions. We'll answer questions at the end. Also, if you want to put in there, if there's any other topics you'd be interested in webinars. Jennifer and I have both been teaching online for several years, and we both have several hundred students, so we do this a lot. So it's just a crazy world we find ourselves in right now. So let's go on. So today we're going to talk about 15 tips and ideas we have for doing online exams. The slides today you can get at http://tiny.cc/AIA-exams. That same URL will be on the last slide of the day. So if you don't quite get it, we'll circle back to it. And we are assuming by everything we're doing here that we've all been put into an online situation. We've gone from face-to-face to online suddenly, and now we've got to deal with it. And most of us probably do not have a proctoring service available to us. So we have to make this work. We just received notification today that we are remote through the end of the semester, and I've heard other schools are now making that call as well. So we're going to share these 15 tips and ideas. Put any comments you have or anything, any questions you have in that Q&A box, and we will get to them at the end. So I'm going to start by our first tip. First of all, I'd say a lot of us have gone from a face-to-face or in-person class where we have a class time to this environment where we're online. So my first tip is that give exams during your scheduled class time. So you're going to find that all students take the exam. If you give the exam at the scheduled class time, everybody's taking it at the same time. So that eliminates some opportunity for doing group exams if you all have to take it at the same time. And this is just best practices that I found. I open the exam 5 minutes before the class starts. I close the exam 5 minutes after the class ends. And I tell them that they have a couple minutes of wiggle room, but I do that in case they have a little bit of trouble getting logged in, that they're not losing exam time. I give them the length of the official class time plus 1 minute for the exam. So my exams are 50 minutes in length. So I start the exam 5 minutes before class starts. It ends 5 minutes after class officially ends, but they have 51 minutes. So they actually have a 60-minute window, and so I found that works really well. And I've actually been doing that this entire year, and that's worked well. So now I'm going to give it over to Jennifer.
Awesome. Thanks, Wendy. So tip number 2 is to design exams to take the entire class period. So, and I'm actually switching. I have not been giving my exams online. I do teach an online class of about 100, but my mass lectures have between 380 and 450 students, and those are given in class. So this is kind of a challenge for me, but I try to always make my exam lengths long enough to fill the class time for the majority of students. And then I set the expectations very early, whether it's online or it's in class. I let the students know ahead of time that they're going to be pressed for time. So for example, as I contemplate, we haven't been told that we're going to be out for the rest of the semester. So I'm really keeping my fingers crossed and hoping we're not. But I've already started kind of preparing in the case that I have to give an exam online. Trying to figure out how to convert what I would normally give in class, try to convert that to online and make sure that the length is still fair. So I'll just kind of talk that a little bit more in the next slide. Wendy, if you could advance. So normally when I write an exam, whether it's online or if it's given live in class, then what I'll do is I'll create the exam, and then I usually set it aside for a few days, and then once I've set it aside for a few days, and I'll pick it back up and I'll take the exam myself for multiple reasons. I don't want to take it right after I've created it because I'm very familiar with the questions, so I can probably answer them much more quickly because I wrote them. So I try to give myself a break from it for a few days, but then I take the exam and I time myself. And then what I'll do is I assume if it takes me, say, 20 minutes, then I'll triple that time and assume that the average student could take it in 60 minutes. Me knowing the exam questions because I wrote them, and obviously knowing accounting, hopefully, I feel like triple the amount of time is usually a good time to estimate, and it's worked well for me in the past. So as I think about converting my exams from in-class to online, as I rewrite those exams for that type of format, I still plan to stick with this, and I think it's always worked very well for me in the past. Our tip number 4 is how to use pooled questions. So although I don't give exams online currently for my live class, I do give several quizzes throughout the semester. So I'm a big fan of using pooled questions. And what a pooled question will do for you online is you can create a bunch of questions for a certain topic area or question area, and then you can have your students, you can have questions drawn and randomized from each pool. So for example, the first week we go back from our spring break, we'll be discussing depreciation methods in financial accounting. So I might create a pool of just conceptually based questions around depreciation and property, plant, and equipment, and maybe intangible assets. And then I'll create another pool of several questions, maybe 15 or 20 questions in each one of these pools, but they might have some calculations involved in them, where maybe I give them some facts and they have to calculate straight line depreciation, for example. But then what I can do is I can tell my system, you can do this in most LMSs. We use Canvas. Prior to that, we used Blackboard, and I could do it in both of those systems. But also publisher platforms will allow you to do this, like MyLab and others, where you can create these pools, and then you can say, okay, grab 5 questions, 5 conceptual questions on depreciation, and then grab 5 of the other pool from the computational questions, and it creates really a unique exam for each one of your students. So if 2 students are sitting there taking the quiz together, then they might have 1 or 2 questions that are the same, but the chances of them having several questions that are the same is very unlikely, and then they'd be in a different order. I also time my quizzes, so they really don't have a lot of time to mess around. They get 1 attempt, and they've got 15 minutes to answer 10 questions, so they really don't have a lot of time to do a lot of comparison and try to coordinate a group effort on that very much anyway. So
okay,
next I'm
thank
going
you.
to turn it over to Wendy to talk more about algorithmic questions.
Yeah. And I do want to say that I have over 400 students this semester, I had over 500 last semester, and I do my exams online pretty much like we're sharing here. So I have students taking the exams during those time periods, and not every student gets an A. So yeah. So I would also suggest using algorithmic questions. So these are questions you create using formulas. So every student's exam is different. You can do algorithmic questions in LMS systems, and you can use different publisher platforms such as MyLab. In Blackboard, if you want to Google how to do it, Blackboard calls it calculated formula questions. So you can put in variables, and then you can also have variables in your answers. So it gives everybody different answers. In Canvas, they call it simple formula quiz questions. And if you're using D2L, it's called arithmetic questions. So just some hints about what to look for. But those algorithmic questions are great because everybody gets different questions. So back to Jennifer.
Thanks, Wendy. And I would say also, if you're not as comfortable in your LMS, or maybe you have an LMS that is a little trickier than your main 3, then you can always create your own pools of algorithmic questions just using Excel. So if you want to have computational questions, then you could use Excel to help you generate different sets of numbers for the questions and the answers. So it will help you generate both the correct answers and the distractors. And we'd be more than happy to to share how to do that maybe at a later webinar, but I know Wendy is a queen at doing that. Next, I don't know, Wendy, did you want to say something? I thought I heard you.
No.
Okay. So next, our tip number 7 is randomizing the multiple choice answers. So once you've kind of set up your quiz in your LMS or your publisher, MyLab or something like that, then you can also not just randomize the questions, but you can also scramble the answer, scramble the order of your answers. So most LMS and publisher tests also allow you to do this, but I'll give you a hint, because when I first started trying to do this online, then in class, I'm a big all of the above, or, you know, A, B, but not C type of multiple choice tester. And of course, when I tried to do this in an online format, I messed it up horribly my first semester trying it. So definitely don't use all of the above as an answer choice, or, you know, calling out certain letters. You could replace that with something like all of the listed choices are correct. So I'd just be careful if you're, especially if you're converting what you would normally have done in class to online and start randomizing things, you really need to think about how you word those questions because they don't always translate from live to online very well. So just some issues to think through.
Okay, thank you. Now, this next one, this applies to my smaller classes, and typically I use this when I have a small class, like advanced management accounting. And I was just talking to a colleague about this yesterday. She wanted to send out files as the exam, and they would have to complete a worksheet. This was an upper level class. And so what she was doing, she had 30 people in her class, so she started with the same basic worksheet that had the data on it, and she changed the numbers so they would be different. But then she also, in the where she was setting up the format where they would put the answers, she did spacing a little bit different here and there, so that if someone were to just copy their friend's wholesale into it, that would be evident to her. And then on an Excel worksheet, there's sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3 by default. She went into sheet 3 and say cell AZ502, for example, she typed the student's name. So that's pretty quick. You can go through 30 of those pretty quickly. And then what she did is she's in Blackboard, and she just uploaded her file for each student, and then it releases at the exam time. So they do their work and then submit it back in Blackboard so she could keep track of it. But that way, when she gets it, she can do a real quick check to see if that student's name is in that cell. You know, put it somewhere they're not going to find it. She actually put it in a couple different places, so the students don't know it's there. And it's just a little thing to help you feel a little bit better about the integrity of the exam.
All right, thanks,
So,
Wendy.
Jennifer.
Yeah, so be consistent with due dates and stagger due dates. So I definitely suggest that now that we're, a lot of you might be moving to this online format, and you're used to, say, collecting homework randomly, or, you know, every week, or doing quizzes in class. Now that you're in an online format, what I've really found helpful throughout the years is to make sure that you set up your expectations and have everything due at the same day and the same time. So I give examples here. If you're going to have them submit homework, then have it due every Friday at, say, 11 p.m. and quizzes due every Saturday at 11 p.m. because then they can set reminders on their phone. It makes it very easy for you to send reminders out, and it kind of gets them in the hang of just making sure that, knowing that they have something due every week at the same day, same time, and it really cuts down on a lot of questions to you, and emails, and anxiety with the students feeling like they never know when anything is due. And then also, like Wendy mentioned before, have your exams on, say, specified Mondays or Wednesdays, but during your what would have been your regularly scheduled class time. I think consistency is key. For number 10, give a practice quiz online before an exam. So I normally do this at the beginning of each semester, and I'm kind of thinking through what I'll do for the remainder of the semester, but normally at the beginning of the semester, I actually give a practice quiz online of the syllabus. and I quiz them. It's, 10 multiple choice questions, not that hard if they've read the syllabus and attended the first class. And I make them worth, say, half a point each, and I tell them it's their only bonus they can earn from me for the semester. But it's just giving them a low stakes or a bonus type of quiz where they can practice taking a quiz online, especially if this is a new format for your class, where the stakes are small, or maybe it's worth a bonus to them, so that it gives them some practice before it really counts for a lot. And I think that's important because it cuts down on the anxiety for the students, and it also helps you try it out to make sure everything's working properly as far as when you set up the time for it to release and all those kinds of things. So I would definitely recommend doing something like that. Next, assign a lot of homework. So we're accountants, we're probably doing that already, right? But I definitely think the more practice, the better. Obviously, whether they're doing that in class or now they're doing it online, then obviously the more practice they get at this new learning format, I think the better. So whether you decide to do a practice exam that isn't worth any points, however you decide to do that, I definitely think the more practice, the better. And repetition is good. And also not just repetition of handwritten homework, but however they're going to be taking that test is how you should be including as part of the repetition that you're having them do. So if you are going to have to change from an in-class test to an online test, then give them some opportunities to do that prior to it really counting for a lot of points. And another thing you might want to consider is maybe add a little less weight to the exams going forward. And I'll be honest, I'm still trying to think through that myself, because I always see the syllabus as kind of my contract with the students. So I don't want them to take the exams less seriously. Clearly, if I'm giving them online, I want them to still understand they're expected to learn and they'll be rigorous. But at the same time, I also don't want to, penalize students that, signed up for a live class, expected exams to be live, and now we're asking them to take it online. So I will be honest, I'm still thinking through some of that myself and how to maybe reallocate some points.
And I would say too, Jennifer, that it's hard to change your syllabus once you've started, unless, say extenuating circumstance. But I have gone to lighter weight on my exams on purpose. And I have probably, I'm guessing, 110 homework assignments of a variety of sorts, a lot more weight in my class on assignments. But students still, they hear the word exam and it sets off two things. First of all, they're like, ooh, this is a big deal. And secondly, anxiety, which is the negative part, but they still do prepare for it. Most students aren't real rational when it comes to exams. And I found that even though my exams aren't nearly worth as much as they used to be, I have 7 now, they still do prepare for it. So, okay, sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no, not at all. Awesome, thanks. So next, as you're creating, say, your multiple choice questions, or as you're putting your exams online, then definitely we recommend that you Google your question before you consider using it, because chances are you're going to find the answer online with little effort. So keep in mind, if you don't have things to lock down students' machines as they're taking the exam, which many of you were assuming you don't, given just the quick change we're having to make, then you definitely want to make sure that questions can't be found online with little effort, right? So I think some of that is making sure you have an exam of a proper length and making sure that the students understand there still will be time pressure. They're not going to have time to do that for every question. But then also maybe Google the questions, and then you can just edit and make it different enough that the answer is not kind of slapping them in the face, that they're going to have to think about it to choose the proper answer. So just some kind of test writing tips.
Yes, and I would second that. You'd be surprised, those conceptual questions you have in test banks or that you've used before, you throw out the first 20 words, 10 words on Google, and boom, it pops up. And for those of you that think, I'm using a lockdown browser that's offered, all that does is prevents the student from using their computer to look up the question. But we know students have phones, we know they have iPads, and they can easily look it up. So don't let a lockdown browser lull you into a false sense of security. But just edit the question. Change the company name to begin with. Maybe change the order of the words a little bit, and that will help a lot. And you can probably only use the question once. It's going to be expired. It's going to be out there on the internet. And then, so this is more, requires a lot more of that maintenance type thing. Okay, so for tip 13, now this definitely depends on your class size, but I have a colleague in a different department, our management information system. He actually uses Zoom for oral exams. And what he does is he sets up appointments with the students. He has 20 students, and they each have like a 15-minute exam, and he asks them a variety of questions and scores them as they're going. So he uses a rubric on the fly, and he says he really likes it because then they can't cheat from each other, and he can probe more if they don't know what they're doing. So I thought that was an interesting idea. Obviously, I'm not doing it with 400 students. You can have students produce YouTube videos. And here, again, this is part of that thing about maybe our exams shouldn't be these big weighted things. Maybe we have a variety of assessments. And students might produce a YouTube video for a particular concept. And you know it's the student, you know it's their work. And then you might have students design digital posters for a topic or a question. And you can actually find ways to post that in your LMS, and other students can participate as well, looking at each other's. Actually, having peer review is one of the big motivating factors. So those are just some ideas to think outside the box. Okay, and then ask complex, specific questions. So I did an example here. Define product cost and period cost. Well, that's something anybody can copy, right? But specify a specific real-life company and give 4 examples of product costs and 4 examples of period costs at that company. Use your imagination and your knowledge of product costs and period costs to answer this question. So you're asking them to apply it to a real-life company. So that's going to take more work, and it's really specific. So again, it's going to take more work than just Googling the answer. So I am a fan of using application type questions where they have to come up with their own examples. Okay, and then realize right off the bat, there is going to be some cheating will occur. Just like companies have bad debts, just because they have bad debts doesn't mean that they're going to quit offering sales on account, because it's a fact of business. You have to do it. So in this environment we find ourselves in, realize that some cheating will occur, and if you structure your course, the impact will not be that great. Like I have, I don't know, 110, 120 assignments, lots of exams. So if someone's cheating, they're going to have a really good friend that wants to do lots and lots of work. But the big advice there is let it go. You know, I mean, do the best you can. You are going to find out that your exam distributions, when you first do this, you think everybody's going to get an A. That's not the case. I have almost the same distribution I had when I had in-person classes. So, so you have to relax a little bit. And now I'm going to give it back to Jennifer, and she's going to kind of summarize her main advice.
Thanks, Wendy. So again, challenging times, but I think the advice kind of is what I would give any new teacher, whether we're teaching live or online. But I would say, you know, think through what you want your policies to be given the new environment, and then stick to it. Communicate with your students what that would be. I would communicate it in writing and be very clear, almost like a revised syllabus, so to speak. Communicate it in writing, communicate it in emails, communicate it with an announcement, and then continually go back to that document or that contract that you've created with the students. I think putting structure in place for the students, especially right now, is key. I know I have a lot of students that are emailing me, my TAs included, just kind of worried and stressed out and trying to figure out how this is going to all work, and worried about grades and how it's going to impact them. And then we have the other students that think that, you know, they're going on break and classes are essentially canceled. So I think it's very, very important right now that we keep teaching. And I think students will appreciate the fact, most of them at least, will appreciate the fact that we're students in this new environment too, right? I don't think it's a bad thing that they can see that we're trying to learn and we're trying to be flexible and adaptable and learn new things right along with them. And, you know, it's, when I had little kids, I used to say more is caught than taught, right? So we teach, teach, teach. I think a lot of what we do, I think how we respond to these changing times and how we decide to just put some structure in place and kind of be calm in the storm. And even if we don't feel like we know what we're doing, then we're going to, you know, let the students know we're going to do the best job we can and we're going to do it together. I really think that that will cut down on a lot of the anxiety for the students, and keeping a firm structure in place will help the semester end well for both you and for them. So I would encourage you to keep teaching. I actually heard some faculty members saying, well, you know, the students are just going to take off. And at this point, you know, I think we're just going to have to assign grades and, you know, phone it in. And that kind of broke my heart a little bit, because I don't think that's really, you know, why we got into the teaching profession. And I guess now it's just a growth opportunity for us. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Wendy to hear her summary and tips.
Okay, so mine, I've been doing this a while, and I'm confident that you all can do this too. So first of all, be flexible. And our institution is telling us that we have to be flexible. So sometimes consider when a student's telling you sick, we can't require sick notes now, you know, so the world has changed. So be flexible. My motto for life is be kind, right? And so be kind to students, be consistent, and be calm, because we're all going to get through this. I'd say the vast majority of us are in the same boat right now. And I myself have been doing this for a while, and I'm totally happy to talk to anyone who's feeling anxiety. Jennifer and I talked about doing this webinar yesterday. We had this idea because I've been hearing my colleagues at school with some concerns, so I thought we'd share this. So just moving forward here, we are going to do a couple more webinars in the next few days, just trying to help people get on board with different topics. And the best way to get notification of that is on our blog. You can follow our blog, which is at accountingisanalytics.com, and there's a sign-up box there that you can sign up. And don't worry, none of this costs money, right? It's just something we do to share. And we do have 2 other webinars coming up. We have one on Wednesday, unrelated to teaching online, but it is some assignments that you can certainly assign online. We have one on Wednesday on Power BI for introductory accounting classes, and then the following week we have one on Tableau. And as I said, in the next week or so, we'll probably have a few more of these teaching online webinars. And so if you want, you can put in the Q&A box if you have any topics you're interested in, or you can always email us. We are, the slides today, if you didn't get it on the first slide, the URL is there. If you have questions for us, you can always reach us through our blog. We do that blog together and with Tracy Miller-Noble, who's not with us today. But I'm now going to go to the Q&A box and see, and see what questions we have. So, okay. Okay. So trouble with the link. Yes. Okay. So I'm not sure why there's a trouble with the link, but that's okay. I will email it. I will email you the link afterwards, so no worries there. How do you assign point deductions to choose multiple answer questions? I only use questions with one answer. And what about you, Jennifer? Do you have multiple answer questions?
No,
and I don't penalize for the wrong answer either.
Right. I mean, I do have, you know, open-ended questions, which I guess could have more than one answer to them if they're open-ended, but I guess I grade more on they're gaining points throughout the whole exam as opposed to deducting, if that makes sense. It's kind of like they're adding up, if that makes sense. So I do have some open-ended questions, and then, but I'd say for an online format, then more like short answer and then multiple choice, true, false, And again, still computational. Usually my students say my true, false, and multiple choice, even in my live class, when I give it to them live on a piece of paper, then they hate those the worst because they're hard, right? They really have, I try to not just test them on a lot of conceptual and definitions, but more higher order thinking, where they have to kind of put some things together to be able to answer the question. So I would say I do have some open-ended, but it's not usually where there's multiple answers.
Okay. Okay. So let's see. The oral exams noted were accounting exams. They were actually for management and information systems, so closely related. I'm going to do those in my executive MBA class this summer. I'm going to do at least one round of those if I really like that idea. Yes. So let's see. Let's see, where else? What else do we have? Do you have problem solving in your exams rather than multiple choice? Yes, I do it in a multiple of ways. So I'm using a publisher platform. So I actually put homework problems on there. So it's just not multiple choice. My exams teaching financial accounting and managerial accounting are largely numeric. So I can get algorithmic in there. I also, in my executive MBA class, because it's much smaller, I do assign where they have to type answers. And so that's where they're submitting. I will do those in Blackboard where they have an answer box to submit their work. What about you, Jennifer? How are you going to handle, do you have anything other than multiple choice on your quizzes?
On the quizzes, no. On the exams, though, they're primarily problem-based. And for my online class, normally what I do with the problems is a couple of different things. I could have them, what I normally have them do to turn in homework and things like that is I tell them to download an app on their phone called Genius Scan. And if they take a picture of their work, then they can it will convert it to a PDF and they can email it right from their phone. So that's like one possibility. If you want to give them like a problem that they need to work out and you want them to show their work, then that's a good way to do it. Or you could have them maybe complete it in Excel where they download an Excel sheet and they've got to fill it in and then they've got to upload that sheet through your LMS. I don't use the publisher testing systems. I usually do everything through Canvas. So there's definitely ways that you can, if you want to do more than multiple choice, but I would also argue that you could have some pretty tough computational questions that are multiple choice. And I'd be more than happy to share with you some examples of things that I've done depending on what you teach. I wouldn't want to share too many examples because I don't want too many examples out there, but I'm more than happy to show you how to write some of those questions that require them to do a lot of analytical thinking before they can answer.
Okay, thank you. We got another question. I'm going to answer this one. I didn't understand about the embed student name in exams in sheet 3. So these are exams where, and I do them with smaller classes, not with my large ones. These are exams where I'll email out the Excel file that contains the problems they need to work on with their data, and then they need to construct it. And so I will go out to sheet 3, which they're not using, right, and pick some random cell way out there, like AZ503 or something, and type their name in it. So when the exam comes back to me, when the Excel file comes back, I can check to make sure their name's there. Because if it's not, they copied someone else's. So it's just a way just to kind of give yourself a little more integrity in the exam process. And how to use Excel in my accounting lab for exam. I do not use Excel with my lab for an exam. I use Excel for the auto-graded exercise in my lab, but not using it for exam per se. Okay, let me see where else. How can I ask multiple questions out of the same data set? It seems that if I find a series of questions that I like, the data set changes for each question. Okay, so it depends on your platform, right? If you're using algorithmic questions, that's a really complicated question because think about yourself. If you were to write those questions, there's no way to refer to a common set. So at this point, I don't think there's a really good answer for that. If you're using a publisher, sometimes they have sets of problems. So there's not a great answer for that. I personally just use standalone questions. The other argument for using standalone questions instead of a data set is if they get one piece wrong, they don't automatically get the rest of the pieces wrong. Again, and the next question about the URL link, I will email it out after we're done here sometime in the next couple hours. So I will email out the handout of all the slides. And let's see, let me go back here and see where else we have. Okay, are there some strategies you can suggest to keep the exam secure? For example, from being copied by students to prevent students from circulating it in like Course Hero. I'll take a stab at that because I've been dealing with that for the last year. I use all algorithmic questions. If I do make up some new questions each semester, like if I have to test about internal controls, I start with the question I want, and then I Google it. If I find it, then I revise it. I revise it till I can find a question stem that can't be brought up immediately. And yes, I have to write new questions every term for those. But the algorithmic are great because I pool them so not everyone gets the same ones. And there's so many exam questions in my pools that it's not like you could just study, here's her list of 30 questions, right? You're going to have more like 300 or 400 to study. So I guess having a multitude, and if someone's going to study 300 questions to be able to do them, they probably deserve an A on that question, on that quiz anyway. Okay, so.
Wendy, can we go back to
Jennifer?
Kathy's? Yeah, can we go back to Kathy's question? Because she was kind of responding to the
I'll get to that next.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, I'll get to that next. Okay. Yeah. So, okay. So let me just cruise through here just a minute. Do you write your own algorithmic questions in MyLab? Yes, you can, and that's a question for your rep. Okay. And yes, and I was getting to Al's question. So yes, what we're doing, I'm going to give it back to you and Jennifer in just a minute. What do I do with students whose computers crash? Well, they get 51 minutes for the exam, and there is no way they can provide proof, right? So if their computer crashes or they get disconnected, usually with that 5 minutes before and the 5 minutes after, they still can complete it. That gives them 10 minutes of wiggle room, and you can usually resolve any situation in that time. MyLab is built so if your computer crashes, your time halts temporarily, so you can get back in, and that goes back to why 5 minutes at the beginning and 5 minutes at the end. In terms of asking for documentation, we're not going to be able to do it, right? I mean, there's no way you can document that. I would say we have to be flexible. We have to give them the benefit of the doubt. And yeah, so anyways, Jennifer, go back then to the one you want to answer.
Sure. So I saw Kathy had a question about the computational multiple choice. So how do I do with partial credit? So through your LMS, at least, I can't speak to my lab, but through your LMS, then there is a way for you to set the grading that the grades are not released to the student so that you can actually review that exam and kind of manually grade it. So if you wanted to give partial credit to multiple choice, you could absolutely do that. I actually do that on my written exams where I'll give some partial credit to the computational multiple choice. So even though you're conducting the exam online, you don't have to have the exam grades released to students. So you could go back and kind of look through and manually grade the parts you'd like to grade. That's how I deal with that.
Or if you're like me and you have 400 students, you're not doing that because it's me by myself. So yes, but I like to have each multiple choice on a separate issue, and if they get it wrong, they don't get credit. I also use exercises on my exam, which are partial grades, so those are good. Okay. Okay, discussion platforms, that's kind of not our topic today, and that's actually a whole nother topic, so we could talk about that a different time. Can I share this presentation with my colleagues? Sure, we'll be sending out the slides. You're free to share them. How do you review homework online? What I've done for the homework, because all my homework is algorithmic. So what I do is I prepare a step-by-step video, just like a screencast of how to do that. So I do it just like I was going to do it in class, or if I was going to review it. and I walk them through that, and then they can use that when they're doing their homework. Their homework's different numbers, and I find that works pretty well. But yeah, I think you're going to, if you assign homework and you're used to going over in class, I think you're going to have to go over it online some way. But those are pretty easy to go over and to make a screencast video, because we have a lot of different tools available to us now. Jennifer?
Yep, I would agree.
What do you think? Yeah.
No, I just agree
Okay.
with what you say. And I also saw a
Okay.
question about how you're going to review things with students, how you'll go over things with students. So I know for what my plan is to have virtual office hours through, we use Canvas, so we'll use Blackboard Collaborate Ultra. And so I'm going to have virtual office hours with my students. And then if they want to go over something one-on-one, then I'll ask them to set up a separate time where just the two of us would go into a session where we could actually go through and talk about how they did on an exam or a quiz, and kind of do that on a one-on-one basis. So I definitely think it's still possible to work with your students individually and talk them through different issues.
Okay, and then I'm going back to the situation where a student tells you they couldn't finish because their internet connection went down. Maybe they started and couldn't finish it. I weigh that. If they say, oh, I just couldn't do it, because my exams are pooled and algorithmic, then I tell them, okay, you can start fresh, and I will delete their first exam and they will start fresh. So they get a second attempt at it, but when I do that, they give up all rights to that first exam. So it's not like you would be able to take the higher of your two scores. So if someone isn't that far into it and they said it's crashed, I just delete it and they start over. If they're almost done, I give them the choice of taking it again fresh, or having their as-is score, and they have to make that choice and they can't go back on it. And again, my exams are all different every time, so it's not like they're seeing it twice. And then here's another one I thought was interesting. How would you go about the student reviewing his or her exam to see where they lost points? Okay, so I get this a lot. And I'm really wrestling with this. When we had face-to-face options, I would just tell them to go in and see my graduate assistant because they have hours on Friday for help. Well, that's obviously not the case anymore. And I think what I'm going to do, because my exams do use a lot of homework problems, when someone asks me about that, I'm going to look through it and see general trends for them. And I'm going to tell them what kind of problems they need to review. And I'm not going to go over the exam with them with the exam on the screen, because that's just asking for go ahead and copy it, record it, all that. And I'm now debating about, do I just release my exams altogether? But I'm not there yet. Okay. Jennifer, do you see any other ones?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the writing capture and how to toggle between different inputs when lecturing online, that is a whole other topic.
Yes. And then
I think the last,
yeah. And I think the last one we're going to do, I think, if it's okay, how do I do virtual office hours, Canvas or Zoom? Well, we use Blackboard. So I use Collaborate Ultra, and I would have no problem doing Zoom. But that, again, is another webinar. I just did one for my college on how to use Collaborate Ultra for office hours, and that went pretty well. So maybe we'll deal with that in a different webinar. But at this point, I think we're done. What do you say, Jennifer?
Yeah, sure. Unless there's any other questions about assessments.
Okay. Well, I will email out the attachment, and I hope you all have a good day and stay in touch.